London, April 1815. The introduction was meant as a kindness. That was the worst part about it. Mrs. Fellows was not a cruel woman. She was simply the kind of woman who said the first accurate thing that came to her, and had never, in 40 years of London society, been required to consider whether accuracy and kindness were always the same. She introduced Cecily Morrow to the newcomer with the cheerful efficiency of a woman performing a social function, and she said the things she said. Terribly capable, rather overlooked. The way of it when one's sister gets all the looks. With the warm, confirmatory smile of someone delivering a compliment alongside a fact. Cecily said what she said. Capable and overlooked have never seemed to me an unfortunate combination. And the newcomer laughed, which was the correct response to something pleasantly precise. And Mrs. Fellows frowned, which was the response of a woman who had been outmanoeuvred without quite knowing how. 6 feet away, the Marquess of Dunmore turned his head. He had been in conversation with Harriet, who was standing in the particular way Harriet stood at assemblies, as though the room had been designed around her, not with vanity, but with the ease of a woman for whom being looked at had always been simply the weather. She was laughing at something, and her laugh was the laugh that drew looks, and the Marquis was doing what men did in Harriet's vicinity, attending. But the laugh from the direction of Mrs. Fellows' introduction was different. It was the laugh of someone who had said something precise and heard it correctly received, and the sound of it, brief, dry, without performance, made him turn his head because it was the least expected sound in the room. He saw Cecily Morrow for approximately 3 seconds. She was looking at the newcomer, not at him, and she had the expression of someone who has made a small, accurate point and is now, with efficiency, moving past it. She was, he noted this with the mild puzzlement of someone taking stock of an incorrectly catalogued item, not what he had assembled from the evenings he had been present in a room where she was also present and had not especially noticed her. He had taken her for a background figure. Something in her posture, at this distance, in this 3-second look, suggested she was not background at all. Then Harriet touched his arm, and he turned back. He did not think about it again that evening, but he did not entirely stop thinking about it either. It sat at the edge of his attention in the particular way of things that are not finished. He did not know yet what Mrs. Fellows had said. He only knew about the laugh. Cecily Morrow had been managing for 5 years. She had been managing since her father's death, which had left the Morrow household in a condition that required managing. Modest income, uncertain legal position regarding the contested portion of the estate, a mother whose natural tendency was to be comfortably adrift, and a younger sister of sufficient beauty to attract the kind of attention that required, paradoxically, its own form of management. She had managed all of it with the patient competence of a woman who had not been given a choice and had therefore decided to be very good at it. She kept the accounts in the small room at the back of the house that had been her father's study and was now hers. His law books still on the shelves, his correspondence boxes still in the corner, his notes on the legal dispute that had cost them 3 years and a significant portion of their available capital still in the bottom drawer, which she had read when she was 21 and annotated in the margins, which was when she had started properly understanding the law. She was not bitter about her position. She had examined the bitterness when it arrived and found it unhelpful, which was her approach to most unproductive things. What she was, beneath the management and the accounts and the graceful social invisibility, was honest. She was honest enough to know that she had noticed the Marquess of Dunmore. Not in the way of someone constructing a hope from nothing. She was not that impractical. In the way of someone who had observed, across the several evenings of his courtship of Harriet, that he was more intelligent than his manners suggested, more careful than his social ease implied, and more worth the trouble of being known than the room gave him credit for, because the room's attention was always on Harriet, and therefore never on him. She had observed this and done nothing about it, because there was nothing to be done about it, because he was courting her sister, and because Cecily Morrow had, after 26 years of being the sensible one, a very clear understanding of the difference between what she noticed and what she was entitled to claim. She managed. That was what she did. The letter arrived on a Wednesday in May. It arrived at the Morrow house by mistake. Or rather, not by mistake, but by the particular deliberateness of a man who had calculated that its arrival at the family of the woman the Marquis was courting would cause the maximum spread of the damage before the Marquis himself knew it existed. Gerald Wynne was thorough in that way. It was addressed to Mrs. Morrow, which meant Harriet opened it first, because Harriet was in the hall when the post arrived and their mother was not. Harriet brought it to Cecily. She brought it with the expression she wore when something had arrived that she could not process and did not know what to do with, a quality she had in common with her mother, the quality of a genuinely warm person confronted with a problem that warmth cannot solve. She held the letter out to Cecily with the particular reliance of someone who has always, in these moments, brought the thing to the person who would know what to do with it. Cecily read the letter. She read it twice. It was a copy, presented as authentic, of a letter allegedly written by the Marquess of Dunmore to a Mr. Calloway, a county investor, in which the Marquis appeared to endorse a scheme that involved the misrepresentation of a land transaction to a group of investors who would, if the scheme proceeded, lose a significant sum. The language was specific, the signature was convincing, the dates were plausible. Cecily read it for the third time with the particular attention she gave to legal documents, for what it said, what it omitted, and where the internal logic began to fail. "This is serious," Harriet said. "Yes," Cecily said. She was still reading. "What does it mean? Is he—" "I don't know yet," Cecily said. She folded the letter. She looked at Harriet with the calm that was not absence of feeling, but management of it. "I need to think about this. Don't say anything to Mother yet. Don't say anything to anyone. But shouldn't we—" "Harriet," she held her sister's eyes. "I need 3 days. Can you give me 3 days?" Harriet looked at her. The look she had given Cecily since they were children, the look that meant, "I do not entirely understand what you are going to do, but I trust that you will do something, and it will be correct." She nodded. Cecily took the letter to her father's study and closed the door. She spent the first evening reading. Not the letter. She had the letter's content established. She read the correspondence in her father's boxes, his letters, his legal notes, the documents from the land dispute and, more importantly, the letters between solicitors that she had been given copies of after his death and had filed away for the day they might be useful. She was looking for the shape of a thing. Forgeries had shapes. She had read enough legal documents to understand that a forged letter was not simply a letter made to look like another person's letter. It was a document constructed from what the forger thought the genuine article should say. And that construction always contained the forger's assumptions, rather than the genuine writer's habits. The letter attributed to the Marquis was too formal in its legal language. Men of his rank, writing to county investors, did not use the specific clause structure that appeared in paragraph 2. They left that to their solicitors. She had read enough of the Marquis's correspondence. His estate communications were a matter of county record. She had requested copies from Mr. Fenn, to know his written style, which was direct and occasionally impatient, and used dashes where a forger would have expected semicolons. The letter had semicolons. She wrote to Mr. Fenn that evening, not to report, to consult. He wrote back the following morning with 2 additional observations she had not made and one that confirmed hers. She spent the second day tracing the letter's origin, not dramatically, methodically. The envelope it had arrived in was not from the county it claimed to reference. The paper stock was a London manufacture. The specific phrase used in the second paragraph, "in full satisfaction of the understanding," appeared in a document she had in her father's boxes from a case involving a Gerald Wynne, who had been a party to a disputed land claim in 1810, and who had used that exact phrase in his solicitor's correspondence. She wrote the phrase in her notebook and looked at it. She wrote the name beside it. She spent the third day establishing the connection between Gerald Wynne and the county investors who stood to receive the letter, the network of distribution, the timeline, and the specific financial grievance Wynne held against the Ashby family from a land transaction in 1808 that had not resolved in his favour. On the fourth day, she went to the Marquis's solicitor. He was a careful man named Alderton, who received her with the courteous disbelief of a man being told something he should have found himself, and who spent 20 minutes asking questions designed to test whether she had actually done what she appeared to have done. She answered every question precisely. He asked her, at the end of the 20 minutes, how she had learned to read correspondence this way. "My father," she said, "and necessity." He looked at the document she had placed before him. He looked at her. He said, "I will need the originals for verification." "I have copies," she said. "The originals are secured. You will have them when the legal process requires them." He blinked. "Miss Morrow." "Mr. Alderton," she said pleasantly. "The letter was distributed to at least 6 families by now. The Marquis has perhaps a week before the damage becomes irreversible. Is that a correct assessment?" He was very still. Then, "Yes, that is approximately correct." "Then the originals will be available when you have done what is required with these copies," she said. "I would suggest moving quickly." She rose. She picked up her bag. She stopped at the door. "I would like this kept between yourself and the Marquis," she said. "My name is not necessary for the legal process. It is simply information from a party who happened to be in possession of the relevant documents." "Miss Morrow—" "Good morning, Mr. Alderton," she said. She might have left it there. She had intended to leave it there. She had intended the solicitor as the clean, invisible route, the information transferred, the legal process initiated, her name unnecessary to the resolution. That was the tidy version. That was the version that allowed her to return to the Morrow household's accounts and her mother's diary management and Harriet's social calendar and be, as she had always been, the person operating in the background of the lives of people the room was watching. What interrupted the tidy version was a conversation she overheard on the Friday afternoon at the Broughton Musicale between 2 society women who had clearly received their version of the letter and were discussing it with the confident speculation of people who have been given a narrative and are in the process of making it permanent. The narrative was already constructed. The Marquis was already guilty in the version the room was assembling. She knew how long it took for a version like that to become the version. She had watched it happen to her father in the last year of his life, when the legal dispute had become the story, and the story had become the fact, and the fact had been wrong, and he had not had enough time left to correct it. She went to Brook Street the following morning. The Marquis was in his study. He was brought to the drawing-room, and he came with the expression of a man who has been managing a crisis for a week and is not entirely in control of what his face is doing. He saw her and stopped. She had called at the house perhaps twice in the weeks of his courtship of Harriet. Polite visits, the elder sister, social necessity. He had been civil and somewhat absent. She understood now, with the clear eye she brought to everything, that he was very much not absent at this moment. "Miss Morrow," he said. "Your Grace." She sat in the chair he indicated. "I have some information for you. I will not take long." She laid the documents on the low table. She walked him through them in sequence: the forgeries' tells, the phrase attribution to Wynne, the 1808 grievance, the distribution network, the timeline. She spoke with the clear precision she had used with Alderton, without embellishment or dramatic presentation, because facts presented accurately were more useful than facts presented effectively, a principle she had inherited from her father's notes. He listened. He asked 3 questions. They were good questions. When she finished, he was very still. "You did this," he said, "in 4 days." 3.5, she said. "The solicitor had the rest." He looked at the documents. He looked at her. "Why did you come yourself?" he said. "Alderton has these." She considered the question. She had asked herself the same question on the way to Brook Street, and she had arrived at an honest answer that she was not entirely certain she should give him. She gave it anyway. "Because I was at the Broughton Musicale yesterday," she said, "and the room is already constructing a version of events that is incorrect. Alderton is careful and thorough, but careful and thorough requires time that the room is not going to give you. You needed to know what the situation actually is, so that you can act on it rather than defend against the version." She paused. "And because I knew what had been done, and I could not unknow it, and I could not leave it alone when it was in my power to address it." She said it with the same plainness she said everything. She was not performing generosity or suppressing a claim. She was simply being accurate about her reasons. He looked at her for a long time. "Miss Morrow," he said. "Yes?" I have attended perhaps 9 or 10 social engagements at which you were also present," he said slowly. "And I find that I cannot account for the fact that I have apparently spent 10 evenings in the same room as the person who did this, and have not—" He stopped. She looked at him. She was not going to supply the end of the sentence. She had decided, before she arrived at Brook Street, that she was going to be honest and practical, and not claim anything that was not hers. Whatever the Marquis made of this information was his own business. "The room tends to direct its attention toward Harriet," she said, without bitterness. "It always has. I have spent most of my life being the background of occasions Harriet is the centre of. It is the natural arrangement, and I do not resent it." She picked up her bag. "I only wanted you to have the documents." She stood. He stood. "Miss Morrow," he said. "I hope the legal matter resolves quickly," she said. "Good morning." She left. She walked to the end of Brook Street and turned onto the main road and allowed herself, for the space of perhaps 30 seconds, to feel the full and inconvenient weight of the morning. Then she folded it away, as she folded most things, into the part of herself that was not for public view, and went home to balance the household accounts. She was very good at balancing the accounts. She found them comforting. The legal matter resolved in 11 days. Alderton was more efficient than she had given him credit for. Perhaps the shock of being outpaced by a woman in her 20s had administered a useful energy. Gerald Wynne, presented with the evidence and the consequence of the alternative, made the practical choice. The forged letter was formally reattributed. The investors who had received it received a correction. The Marquis's parliamentary work continued without interruption. Cecily heard most of this through the normal channels of county news, which was sufficient. She did not hear from the Marquis. She had not expected to. She had given him what was useful, and she had left. And that was the complete and appropriate shape of the thing. It was during those 11 days that Harriet spoke to her. She came to the study one evening with the expression Cecily had learned to read over years. The expression of Harriet about to say something honest that she has been working up to for some time. She sat in the chair across from the desk and folded her hands and looked at Cecily with the open-hearted directness that was her best quality. "There is something I need to tell you," Harriet said. "About the Marquis," Cecily said. Harriet looked at her. "How did you know?" "You have been looking at him differently for 3 weeks," Cecily said. "Not badly, differently. In the way of someone who is reassessing something." She set down her pen. "Tell me," Harriet told her. In Bath, in March, she had met a man, a quiet officer, a captain returned from the peninsula, with a serious face and an unexpectedly good sense of humour, and the quality of someone who looked at her and liked what he saw without being dazzled by it, which had turned out to be the quality she had been looking for without knowing it. She had thought for some weeks that it was nothing. She had thought she was being foolish. She had spent the weeks of the Marquis's courtship trying to feel what she should feel for a perfectly good man, and she could not feel it, because she had already felt the other thing in Bath, and it had made everything else seem like a careful copy. "I like him," Harriet said of the Marquis. "He is a good man, but I think—" She looked at her hands. "I think I have been accepting his attention because it is the kind of attention women are supposed to want, and not because it is the specific attention I want." Cecily looked at her sister for a long moment. "You need to tell him," she said. "I know," Harriet said. "Kindly," Cecily said, "but clearly." "I know." Harriet looked up. "Cecily, I'm sorry. I know you've been managing all of this, and I have not been—" She stopped. "I don't always notice what you do. I should notice more." Cecily looked at her sister. Beautiful, warm-hearted, fundamentally decent Harriet, who had been the centre of every room since she was 15, and who was, in this moment, being more honest than the room ever required her to be. "You are my sister," Cecily said. "I do not need to be noticed. I need you to be honest with him." Harriet nodded. She rose. She stopped at the door. "You found something, didn't you?" she said. It was not entirely a question. "With the letter, you found something." "It has been handled," Cecily said. Harriet looked at her with the expression she sometimes gave Cecily, the expression of someone who has grown up alongside a person and is, periodically, newly surprised by them. "How do you do that?" she said quietly. "Do what?" "All of it," Harriet said. "Just all of it. Without anyone knowing. Without requiring anything." Cecily looked at her pen. "I was taught to read documents carefully," she said. "The rest is just paying attention." Harriet left. Cecily sat in the study for a long time, with the window going dark outside and the accounts open in front of her, and she thought about the Marquis and what Harriet was going to say to him, and what would come after. She was honest with herself about what she felt. She was always honest with herself. She felt the thing she had been managing for several weeks. She let herself feel it, for the duration of the evening. Then she closed the accounts book and went to bed. He came on a Tuesday. Mrs. Morrow was at her sister's in the morning, which meant the drawing-room contained Cecily, who was writing letters, and a housemaid who had just been told to take the tea things away. The Marquess of Dunmore was shown in. He stood in the doorway of the Morrow drawing-room with the expression of a man who had been thinking carefully about what he was going to say, and had arrived at the realization that thinking carefully had not been sufficient preparation. He looked at Cecily with the direct attention she had first observed 6 feet away at the assembly. The look of a man who has stopped looking past something and started looking at it. "Miss Morrow," he said. "Your Grace?" She set down her pen. "Harriet is not at home." "I know," he said. "I came to see you." She looked at him with the clear, level attention she gave to everything that required it. She had been expecting this. She had allowed herself to expect it, cautiously, as she allowed herself most things, with the clear understanding that what she expected and what arrived were 2 different things until they were the same thing. "Sit down," she said. He sat. They were quiet for a moment. He appeared, she thought, to be in the process of choosing between several versions of what he had come to say, and finding all of them insufficient. "I have been informed," he said at last, "by Alderton, by Lord Caverley, and by Gerald Wynne's own legal representative, of what you did. The full scope of it." He paused. "Alderton told me, specifically, that you had constructed the chain of evidence in 3 days, had identified the perpetrator independently, and had arrived at his office with organized documentation that he described as, his exact words, the most efficiently assembled legal argument he had encountered from a party outside the law." She said nothing. "He also told me," the Marquis continued, "that you specifically asked that your name be kept from the proceedings, that you described yourself as simply a party in possession of relevant documents." "That was accurate," she said. "It was considerably more than that," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I did what was available to be done," she said. "Anyone with the relevant knowledge and the documents would have done the same." "They would not," he said. "They did not. I had Cecily." He said her name with the particular abruptness of a man who had been saying Miss Morrow and has run out of patience with the distance it creates. He looked at her with the expression she had been watching develop over the weeks, the expression of a man who has not been looking closely enough and is now, with the specific attention of someone who has understood his own error, looking. "I have spent 4 months attending to your sister, who is a lovely person and who I respect very much, and who has told me very honestly and with great kindness that she cannot give me what I was hoping for, which I find myself, upon reflection, accepting more easily than I would have anticipated." She was very still. "I have spent 4 months also being in rooms where you were present," he said, "and I confess to you that I noticed you less than I should have. Not because you were not there. You were always there, managing the room, managing your mother, managing whatever required managing, with the particular absence of fuss that means the people being managed do not know they are being managed. I noticed the result without seeing the person producing it." He paused. "I want to correct that," he said, "if you will allow it." Cecily looked at him. She was honest with herself, as she always was, about what she felt in this moment. Something careful and warm and not entirely controlled. The thing she had been managing for weeks. The thing that had refused to be merely filed and put away, no matter how methodically she had attempted it. She was also honest about her conditions. "You should know," she said, "that I have no interest in being a consolation arrangement. I am not the practical choice after the impractical one has resolved itself." She held his gaze. "If what you are proposing is that I am suitable because I have proven myself useful and my sister is unavailable, then I am grateful for the call, and I hope your parliamentary work continues to go well." He looked at her for a long moment. "That is a fair challenge," he said. Yes, she said. It is? Then let me be precise, he said. He leaned forward slightly, not performance, but the body's natural movement toward the thing it means. I came here on a Tuesday morning, when I knew your mother was not at home and your sister was not at home, because I wanted to say something to you without the social machinery of the room around it. And what I want to say is this. I have spent 11 days since the Friday you came to Brook Street thinking about you. Not about the documents, about you. About the woman who walked into my study and laid out a legal argument with the efficiency of a barrister, and then said she could not unknow what she had known, and therefore could not leave it alone. He paused. I have been thinking about what you said at the Broughton Assembly last month, which I did not hear at the time, but which Alderton mentioned because someone told him. That capable and overlooked had never seemed to you an unfortunate combination, and I have been thinking about the fact that I was one of the people for whom you were overlooked, and that this is— He stopped. That is not an easy thing to sit with. She said nothing. She was listening. I am not proposing a consolation arrangement, he said. I am proposing that I have been, for 4 months, in the presence of someone I should have seen earlier and did not, and that I would very much like to correct the imprecision if she is willing to allow the correction, and that my regard for her is not derived from the documents or from her sister's unavailability or from anything other than the specific and accumulating evidence of who she is, which I have been reviewing with considerable attention for 11 days, and which I find entirely remarkable. He finished. The drawing-room was very quiet. Cecily looked at the pen she had set down when he arrived. She looked at her hands. She looked at him, at the Marquess of Dunmore, who had come on a Tuesday morning without her mother or her sister present, and who had said the things she had required him to say, precisely, without management or performance, and who was now waiting with the specific quality of a man who has said what he came to say, and is genuinely uncertain whether it will be sufficient. It was, she thought, a very decent speech for someone who had not had 11 days to prepare it. She had spent 11 days, as it happened, preparing her own. I have conditions, she said. Something shifted in his face. The relief of a man who recognizes a register and knows from the register what answer is arriving. I would expect nothing else, he said. I will not be managed, she said. Not the household's management. That I am willing to provide, and I suspect I will be good at it. But my own opinions, my observations, my reading of a situation, those are not to be discounted because they arrive from me rather than from a man in the same room. If I tell you there is a problem in the accounts, or the estate correspondence, or the parliamentary schedule, I require you to hear it. Agreed, he said, readily. And I will require, from time to time, the study to myself. I think better alone, and I have spent 5 years in a household that requires constant managing, and I need to be able to close a door sometimes. The study at Dunmore House has excellent light, he said. I will have a second desk commissioned. She looked at him. He looked back. The study desk was not a small thing. It was the exact right thing, said with the exact right precision, and she thought, he listened to what I said. He heard the actual thing. She said, then yes. Yes, he said. Yes to the correction, she said. Yes to all of it. The thing you came to propose. She looked at him with the clear, full attention of a woman who has been the sensible one for 26 years and is, for the first time, being given the opportunity to be simply herself. Subject to the conditions. He looked at her. His expression was, she thought, the most genuine she had seen from him in 4 months of drawing rooms and assemblies, and the brief 6-foot look at an assembly when she had made a remark and someone had laughed. "Subject to the conditions," he said. He smiled. It was a real smile, not the social performance, but the specific, particular smile of a man who has arrived at the right place and is now entirely certain it is the right place. She had never seen it before. She found she wished she had. She filed this, as she filed most things, for later. Her mother returned home at 12:30 and found the Marquess of Dunmore in the drawing room with Cecily, and the expression on Mrs. Morrow's face underwent a rapid and comprehensive series of revisions that was, Cecily thought, one of the more instructive performances she had observed in some time. "Your Grace," her mother said, and then looked at Cecily, and then looked at the Marquis, and then arrived with the particular social agility of a woman who has been wrong about a situation and requires approximately 30 seconds to become retroactively right about it. "I have always thought Cecily was... I have always said to people..." She stopped. "Well, you see, I have always known there was something quite..." "Mother," Cecily said pleasantly, "shall I ask for tea?" Her mother sat down and recovered her composure with admirable efficiency, and spent the following half-hour establishing, to her own satisfaction, that she had always expected this outcome, which Cecily received with the affectionate accuracy she brought to all of her mother's retroactive certainties. The Marquis stayed for an hour and was, throughout, excellent company. When he rose to leave, he said to Cecily in the hall, where Mrs. Morrow was occupied with the housemaid, "You have been managing this family for 5 years." "Yes," she said. "Who manages you?" he said. It was not a challenge, it was a genuine question, asked with the specific attention he had been giving her since the study. She considered it. "No one," she said. "Until recently, I have not required it." He looked at her. "And recently?" he said. She held his gaze with the direct clarity that was her whole character. "Recently," she said, "I have been managing somewhat less efficiently than usual, on the subject of certain Tuesdays in Mayfair." He said nothing for a moment, then, very quietly, "I intend to continue to be a problem on that particular subject," he said, "if you are agreeable." She was, she found, entirely agreeable. Harriet's letter arrived from Bath in July. It was long and warm, and contained, in the manner of Harriet's letters, more feeling than structure, and it described the officer in terms that made the feeling entirely clear. His name was Captain Arden. He had a serious face and a good sense of humour, and had asked her, in June, a question to which she had said yes, without any of the hesitation she had been trying not to feel for 4 months in London. The postscript said, "I am very glad the Marquis finally looked properly. I always knew he would eventually. You are quite impossible to miss, Cecily, if one simply takes the trouble to look. I love you very much." Cecily folded the letter and held it for a moment. She thought about 23 years of being the background. She thought about the assembly and Mrs. Fellows and the laugh and the 6-foot look. She thought about 11 days of accounts that had been harder than usual to balance. She thought, Harriet is wrong in the way that kind people are sometimes wrong. I was not impossible to miss. I was very easy to miss, if one did not look. Most people did not look. She thought, one person looked. She put the letter in the correspondence box and went to write her reply, which was warm and direct, and said in the postscript that she was glad about Captain Arden, and that she hoped Bath was everything it should be, and that she had herself been considerably less sensible than usual lately, which she found she did not regret at all. They were married in October at the Morrow Parish Church, not Dunmore House's chapel, which had been the Marquis's first suggestion, but the small church Cecily had attended for 26 years, which she preferred because it was old and honest and had nothing to prove, and she had always respected those qualities in a building as in a person. Her mother cried, which was inevitable. The housemaid cried, which surprised everyone. Mr. Fenn attended, which moved Cecily more than she had expected, because he had been her father's colleague and her own teacher, and the fact of him in the church pew was the fact of continuity, the proof that what her father had given her had been worth the giving. Afterwards, at the wedding breakfast, the Marquis found her by the window that looked out on the garden. He said, "Your father taught you to read documents." "Yes," she said. "What else did he teach you?" She thought about it. About the law books and the correspondence boxes and the notes in the bottom drawer and the dispute that had cost him 3 years and the reading that had begun when she was 21 and had not stopped. "He taught me," she said, "that a document says what it says, omits what it omits, and is trying to do something that is not always what it appears to be doing, and that the most important skill is learning to read all 3 at once." The Marquis looked at her. He was describing more than documents, he said. "Yes," she said. "He usually was." She looked out at the October garden, the leaves turned and falling, the light, the particular clean gold of an English autumn that has decided to be itself without apology. Beside her, the man who had finally looked and had found. And had come on a Tuesday morning and said the precise thing that was required. She was not the beautiful sister. She had never been the beautiful sister. She was the one who read the documents and kept the accounts and managed the room without the room's knowledge. And she had been doing it for 26 years, in the expectation that this was the entirety of what she had been given to do. She had been wrong about that. She was glad to be wrong. She took his arm and they walked back into the room, and the room, which had spent 4 months looking at Harriet, looked at Cecily Morrow, and found, as it should always have found, someone entirely worth looking at. And perhaps that is why this story refuses to let us go. Not because a forgery was uncovered, or a name was saved, or a careless man corrected himself and chose more wisely, but because a woman had spent 26 years being described as capable and overlooked, and had never once accepted the description as a verdict. She had simply known what she was worth, and done the work, and waited, without particular hope, but also without despair, for the world to catch up. The world was slow. The world is often slow. But one man looked on a Tuesday morning in April, and then again on a Friday in May, and then again and again, until the looking became something permanent and specific, and directed entirely at her. That is perhaps all that love requires. One person who finally looks properly. And one woman who, when looked at, does not flinch. Subscribe to Moonlight at Mayfair and return for the next story beneath the soft light of the evening star. Moonlight at Mayfair, where every love is hard won and every ending is deserved.